Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daily Wolves. I'm Will, and as always, I'm joined by Chris. Chris, hello.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Yes, and with it being Tuesday, we are, of course, going to be focusing on tactics throughout this episode. But before we get there, let's add in a bit of Transfer Tuesday, shall we say? Or in Wolves' case, no transfers Tuesday.
Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about Bastien Mwepu in the past couple of episodes. I think we believe his medical was either done today or yesterday, and that signing is imminent.
Should we just summarise for anyone that missed that discussion last week?
Go ahead.
This is just off the top of my head because I don't have the stats in front of me, but young central defender from France. But again, another one for the future, arguably may go into the squad this season and, looks solid, but not, again, we mentioned last week, not necessarily the Premier League, well, definitely not the Premier League experience that Gary Neal keeps talking about or did speak about up until a week or so ago. And, looks exciting, but given recent performances, not what people will be want. No. Maybe like if Sunday's result hadn't happened, we'd probably be like, hey, exciting young defender. But given recent performances, everyone will be like, what? This is not what we wanted.
So apart from that deal, Wolves, the transfer of Burnley winger Coliscio.
We've been umming and ahhing over that one. Coliscio, I believe. I'm sure someone will correct me.
Of course, what I said. I apologise. I've butchered that pronunciation, but talks are still ongoing with him, and we hope to, of course, have him in by the end of the week. However, it's not necessarily our main focus.
No, and obviously, apparently, because we spoke last week or the last couple of weeks about Dara O'Shea, that obviously fell through. Yeah. Apparently, the clubs were far apart on their valuation. I think, did he end up going? Has he gone for like 15 million or something to?
Ipswich, wasn't
it? But then again, given the recent result, people are going to be questioning whether or not we should have just lumped up the cash on that one because he has got some experience, and so it's all a bit. It's not an exciting time in terms of transfers, as always.
No, the only other thing is that talks are still ongoing as well with Ramsdale, which I'm still not a fan of, even if we did concede 6 to Chelsea. But again, it's all speculation, and we're interested, and like I said, negotiations are taking place, but nothing concrete at all.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I can safely say in regards to the goalkeeper situation there is that none of the 6 were down to Jose Sar's footwork. As in on the ball, because we talk about playing out from the back, and potentially, that's someone they were looking for someone who can do more of playing out the back, be more of that keeper sweeper, and none of that would have mattered.
That is the one thing I don't really understand with the Ramsdale links. Because it's been proven that he's not good at playing out from the back, hence why Arsenal dropped him and got in another goalkeeper. That was the whole reason.
Yeah.
So, again, boggles the mind. But apart from that, unfortunately, we don't have any more transfer stories to tell.
I mean, nothing exciting, nothing concrete. As always, the newspapers and the Twitter sphere is full of, random things, but it's solidity that we are always looking for. And no solid, exciting news other than the 2 nuggets that we've just discussed, which is a shame.
Yeah. Hopefully that changes by the end of the week. I'm not getting my hopes up. But the one thing's for certain is there will be absolute uproar if nothing happens.
Yeah, particularly if there's not a centre-back coming in. I think that's the one that everyone is wanting. And yes, we've got this young French star, looks exciting coming in, but as I mentioned, it's not what people I think are yearning for I'm happy to be proven right. I mean, I'd love nothing more than for us to sign him and him to be like immediately bumped, or within a few weeks be an amazing star in the back four and just be like, what are we worrying about? This kid is awesome and he's just going to take the world by storm. But the chances of that being the case, given his small amount of performances, is slim at best.
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to that lack of experience, doesn't it? But we'll see. But
we will.
As you can probably tell from our discussion so far about transfers, it has all been linked to the tactics of our starting 11 and how we think or other Wolves fans think they should and or shouldn't line up. The big discussion, obviously, the past few weeks revolving around the defence. Yeah. So, Chris, first of all, I'm gonna jump straight to it, and ask you now. Perhaps not for Burnley on tomorrow, but for Forest at the weekend. Assuming no signings come in, what would your defence look like? I'm putting you on the spot.
And even if a signing comes in this week, I think you'd struggle to see them as anything more than a sub at the weekend, given the turnaround would be ridiculous. I don't think that would be fair. I think we'll continue to see the same again in terms of a back four. I don't think Gary Neal is going to have done all of the preseason. He's stuck to this solidly, this kind of back four formation, whether it's been, most of the time it's been Totti and Mosquera, but whoever it's been rotating in preseason, that it's been a back four. It shifts in and out of possession, but basically it's a back four for most of the time. I don't see him ripping up everything after two performances against a title contender. And whatever we think about Chelsea, like the amount of money that they've spent and some of the players, it's 2 games. I don't see him, tearing it apart and panicking. I don't think that's his style. No. I do think he's clearly going to have had some strong words this week, because we saw, I can't remember the exact sentence, but in his press conference after the game, he even mentioned himself that for 2 of the goals, there was no left back, that there was no left back on that part of the pitch, referring to the fact that Aït-Nouri was nowhere near, completely out of place for at least 2 of the goals. So clearly he's already he's aware of what's gone wrong there, because I mentioned I felt sorry for Totti at the weekend, because yes, he is not even arguably the weakest in that back line of the centre backs, and in terms of experience when you think about Dawson on the bench. But I felt sorry for him because he's just getting overrun.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly helped out.
So I've gone on a bit of a sidetrack, but my point was, yes, I think we'll still see the same formation. I think it'll be interesting, actually. You mentioned skipping Burnley, but it'd be curious to see if he experiments with something in the Burnley game in terms of a different formation or a different combination of the back four, not just in terms of resting, but in terms of, seeing who else can play in that formation.
Yeah, which leads me perfectly on to the fact that if Santi Bueno doesn't get any minutes in either of those 2 games, then just pack up and go home, lad. You're wasting your time. I've said it once, I'll say it again. But you'd like to think surely he has. I get where you're coming from in terms of, especially with all the work during pre-season, it would equally be a risk as the back four has been a risk. It would equally be a risk to just flip it on its head. So I do get your point. But before I give you my thoughts on what my formation would be, I'd just like to ask the listeners, do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at the Global Sports Podcast Network. Zencastr makes it easy to start high-quality podcast built for growth from day one, with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, you knows, and 20 other speech patterns, Zencastr makes it super easy to start a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I know you want to mention your formation. Before you do, I've just been thinking about like what I was saying about, I think we'll see a back four again. What I didn't get to was I think you could potentially see a wild card, considering we're away to Forest. Is it Forest? We're away to Forest. Different kind of matchup. Yeah, it's very much a den, and there's a lot of bad blood there in many ways with Morgan Gibbs White, and obviously we've got the Nuno factor, and there's been a lot of stuff going on in the last couple of seasons against them. However, given the reference to the fact that there was basically Gary Neville referring to the like no left back for some of the goals, and Aït-Nouri was out of position a lot, and the shape wasn't there.
I can see where you're going with this.
Semedo is still suspended. If Semedo wasn't, I'm going to say two things. One, if Semedo wasn't suspended, I think you would see Semedo right back and potentially Doherty left back, and be like almost bench Nouri and be like, you need to get your stuff together.
Yeah.
Or have him up higher up as a winger, because we know he could do that, not a problem.
Yeah.
But given that Semedo's still out, I think it's still possible. You could see still him getting benched for a moment to be like, look, son, you need to work, you need to get this sorted, and see Doc on the left and Pedro Lima coming at right back.
See, I think I can see your logic, and I think again it's a risk because of the sheer quality that Aït-Nouri does possess. And I think O'Neill, has spoken about how much of a fan he is of his in the past, although undeniably he was at fault for some goals on Saturday. I think it'd be a risk to leave out a player of his quality. I think it'd be a massive, massive risk, but he does certainly perhaps need to be humbled and grounded, which I think is one of the main reasons he came off against Chelsea. I mean, obviously he was at fault for the goals, but he needs to know that and be made aware of that and work on that. I'm sure O'Neill will be the man for that job. I think if you were going to go down that route, you would actually see Totti pushed out to left back, and Dawson or Bueno coming in. But I do think that'd be the most rigid a back four you can possibly get. Would we still see it with the high line and so on? I don't see how that's feasible. I think that's asking for trouble, as it has been the past two games. I mean, I know we speak about the quality of Chelsea and Arsenal, but you play like that defensively against any team in this division, and the chances are you are going to pay for it. Although we'll have more of a chance of getting away with it, we know they do have quality players. I can see it. What I would do personally is I think I would go to a back five for one reason, and one reason only, really. You can't lose your first 3 games. We just can't afford for that to happen, because then you start to get in serious trouble. That's a really woeful start. If that's the case, and there are no signings as well, or none to go straight into the first team, then the atmosphere at Molineux is going to become toxic, and there's going to be some serious issues. And we can see it. I could see it unfolding the way it has done under previous managers. So that does worry me, and that is why I would potentially go to the back five, because it's been proven that we need more quality for the four to work. And although we're coming up against, I don't want to say a lesser opposition. That's not. I don't want that to sound disrespectful, but
no, disrespectful. It's fine.
We've spoken about. We've had a tough start to the season. You just can't lose again. You can't. That's just not an option as far as I'm concerned, and it's not a risk that we should be taking, unless they come out with a back four and miracles have happened overnight, and all the passing out from the back and positional issues are magically sorted, then I just do everything to be as secure as possible at the back and make sure we don't lose the 3 opening games, because then we're going to have big issues.
I understand your concern. I just don't see him. I don't see him going to a 5 against Forest. I know it's away. I just don't see him changing it so soon. And I understand what you meant about, it's probably more logical to go, shift Totti out, bring it. This is in my thing of like giving Aït-Nouri a little bit of a thing and bringing him on as a sub maybe later on. But shifting Totti out and having Doc at right back, and then someone more experienced come in the middle. However, I said it was a wild card, and we've brought this youngster in. He looked exciting in pre-season, and maybe if he plays against Burnley, in midweek and impresses again, then maybe we will see him on Saturday. I was throwing out the wild card because I would love nothing more than bring Pedro Lima. Let's see Pedro Lima and shift Doc over and have a little bit of excitement, because that at least Doc isn't going to go roaming on that left-hand side to protect Totti a bit more, is what I'm thinking.
So that would be your back 4 then, would it? Lima and Doherty either side, and the centre-backs unchanged?
I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it's logical. I'm not saying it's recommended. But in my random wild moment of craziness, I'm going to be like, Doc left. But Doc left back, Pedro Lima right back, and then give Mosquera and Totti another go in the middle against, a team that is not a top 6 team, and see what happens.
I'll go for this. This would be mine. Starting from right to left, I'm going to back 5. Doherty right wing back. Doherty right wing back. Mosquera, Dawson, Bueno, Aït-Nouri. I'm sorry, I'm dropping Totti. Controversial, I know, to leave Aït-Nouri in, but instead of completely dropping him, because he does have just an obscene amount of quality on the ball, it's ridiculous. And I know that doesn't make it fair. And I'm not dropping Totti because of his... I do still think he was harshly done by Aït-Nouri against Chelsea, that sort of left him out to dry. But instead of dropping Aït-Nouri completely, I just think, during the week and before kick-off, just grab him by the scruff of the neck and say, don't you dare go wandering about like you did against Chelsea. But even then, wing-back position, I suppose he does have more of a licence to do so. But I'd really sort of, I think, give him just an old-fashioned, just stern warning and telling off, and make him realise that he let his team down at times. And he's not the only one. He's not the only one.
No, and I'm not saying it's all on him. I was just pointing out that, Gary Neal, it was interesting that Gary Neal mentioned it himself in one of the press conferences, that there was basically no left back on the pitch for some think... of the goals. And it just stood out as being, that's like naming without naming the fact that there was a problem there.
I mean, it was clear for everyone to see, but I think if you go to that back 5, you're going to have cover there. You're going to have support. You're going to have experience and strength and quality. I mean, Dawson came on, as I mentioned, for 15 minutes, maybe more, maybe less, against Chelsea, and we didn't concede. He did. I'm not saying he made the game would have unfolded differently with him starting from the off. But I think just that sheer quality and experience that he possesses, if we're struggling defensively, it's criminal to keep forcing ourselves to struggle by trying to live and play this dream of a back 4 that in reality isn't working for O'Neill. And before we delve even deeper into that, I'd like to just give a quick reminder that this podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football, and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts the fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day. But yeah, I mentioned this back four being a sort of dream for the manager to play. And the reason I mentioned that, speaking of dreams, I'm going to loop all the way back to the Nuno days, who, of course, were facing Nuno this weekend. And towards the end of his spell at the club, the back five became a bit predictable, a bit sort of, it started to stagnate a bit. I don't know if it was the same person saying the same things to the same people. And he just took us as far as he could. That was the sort of general consensus. And so there's pressure on him to change the system to a back four.
You're talking about towards the end of the Nuno era.
End of the Nuno campaign.
I mean, because I don't want to take us down a different rabbit hole, but I do feel there's other sad factors about the end of the Nuno era. I think that COVID actually had that whole period had a massive impact on him as a person and the team. He very much seemed impacted by the fact that there was no crowds, and he just seemed like a very depressed figure in that whole COVID era.
Yeah, and that's understandable. At the end of the day, they are human. I'm not saying that the tactics were the reason, the sole reason he departed from the club. But as I mentioned, he did try to go to a back four, and I think in those days it would have been Aït-Nouri left back. We saw Cody not fitting in with the four. We see that now in the same way we see it with Mosquera not fitting in with the four. So it's always been an issue from then. It was an issue then under Nuno. It was then an issue under Lage, wanting to play a back four. I mean, to be quite frank with you, I remember Lage playing Ruben Neves centre half against it was Chelsea and West Ham.
But that was like the point when he was already on his way out, and that was the point everyone was like, "What are you doing? You've put our best player completely out of position." And there was, I can't remember who was on the bench, but I remember thinking there was options on the bench.
Yeah. But what I will say,
pointless. Sorry, that just you brought me nightmares. Me nightmares, Will.
But look, he didn't make any mistakes whilst he was playing there.
Well, no, he's Ruben Neves.
Exactly, but at least he could play out from the back under pressure in a back four. It does help. But so it was an issue under Nuno, an issue under Lage. Lopetegui wanted to play it as well and did at times. We mentioned with Totti playing left back, but he also played left wing back in a back five a lot of the time, especially as we were trying to survive. That gave us way more solidity. But it's always been something that the managers of the club have wanted to do, but just not had the players to do it.
Yeah, we saw last season. I mean, Gary O'Neill did the first couple of games with the back four we mentioned last week, and obviously he shifted to a back five when he realised he didn't have the capability. And also, obviously, he hadn't had a pre-season, didn't really know the players, so probably also just had to, he was very much adapting on the fly to what he could do. Obviously, he's been hopeful that having the pre-season, he was going to get it to work this time. And it's just going to be, we know that this is going to be an ongoing discussion. I'm sure loads of people out there, whether they're listening to this or not, all the Wolves fans, it's going to be a big debate over the coming week or two, pending on results pending, as to whether we continue with the four or whether we continue with the five. And I will say another factor that you have to bring in now for me, this is a fresh season, a fresh set of results, so it doesn't really matter what happened at the end of last season, but there are people who take that into consideration. You think about the end of Bruno Lage's era, the second half of his last full season trailed away with a similar trail to Gary O'Neill's last season, with however many defeats it was on the trot, and no wins in the last quarter of the season. And then Bruno Lage was similar, and now we're continuing. People are pointing out the continuing losses from the end of last season.
Yeah.
Yes, the opposition has been, we've got some tough. We've arguably got one of the toughest openings of the league. I think it's been like verified it as like being the most difficult thing. Again, we're going on to like the stat things that are just stupid, but we know it's a difficult intro. So people are going to be. He's just been given a new contract. But there's already going to be people out there going, well, if it continues a losing streak from last season and doesn't get wins and then refuses to shift to a back five and we keep seeing the results come, are people going to get impatient? Are people going to get restless? How long are they going to give him? And is he going to then, at what point is he going to shift?
Well, I don't think the blame will necessarily be on O'Neill. I think there will be a bit of it if he sticks with the 4 and it doesn't pay off and we lose. Because as I said, you can't lose your first 3, despite, the results from last season as well. If you add those to it, if you are one of those people including those, then it just makes it look even worse than it already is. But you can't let that happen anyway. That's really bad going. Not necessarily his fault, but I just think the attitude and atmosphere towards Fosun and Jeff Shi will be horrendous, and it has to be. I am one of these people who are very grateful for them in terms of, growing up, as I mentioned, in Birmingham, being the only Wolves fan about, with us being in League One when I was at school and stuff like that. To transform the things the way they did for us was magical. We never would have thought that would happen, and especially in the style that it did. That season we got promoted, and then the next season we got Europa League. Then the season after that we're playing in Europa League. The turnaround was crazy. But
you don't have to preach to me. We've explained for others out there that you've been on that journey in your generation, and myself. I mean, I remember us in the old First Division and then being stuck, in the First Division for forever when it felt like we would never ever get to the Premiership. And Steve Bull in tears because he knew that when he didn't make it through the playoffs in the mid-90s, that was probably it. That was because he turned down chances for transfers. He stayed true. And we were all like feeling it for him, all in tears of the fact that we thought we were never going to get there, and he never got there. And so for some of us, we've been here for decades, up and down, and then multiple relegations through all of the divisions, and then back up again, all that kind of stuff. So I think, I'm eternally grateful for, like many, for what has happened over the past, say, decade of this transition. And I am very grateful for the initial turnaround and what they've helped do and get us to the Premiership. And I don't want that to be underestimated, because I do think we have to remember where we were. However, I don't want us to become one of those clubs that stagnates.
No.
And then, just tries to get by and get by and get by. And then because you're not putting anything in, before you know it, 2-3 seasons down the line, if not this one, you're suddenly always in that relegation dogfight. Whether it's like Leicester or Everton or whoever it is that is always constantly on the last day trying to survive. I don't want to be one of those clubs.
No, but then there'll be people who, if we are, that will still bang on about how you should be grateful because we got there. No, that's not how it works. Once you're there, of course you're grateful for the experience, the times that you're having on the up and when you're there, but you still always want to improve, because otherwise, what's the point? There's no point in it. Do you know what I mean? But so we need to be really, really careful. Now, that's what I've said about the losing the 3 games as well. As you just mentioned, you don't want to get yourself into that dogfight, and we shouldn't. But you speak about stagnating, and slipping into that fight. I think that, with the defence, I really wasn't bothered. In fact, I was actually quite happy when we sold Kilman because it was for 40 million. But that 40 million, if it's not translated into quality on the pitch at all in any capacity, I know we've had Mosquera come back. I don't know if he's an upgrade as such on Kilman. I don't think he's far off if he isn't. But it's very much sort of somewhat like for like in terms of quality. But then in a back four, still doesn't work on its own. So we speak about this money coming in and what have you, but we've not actually progressed in terms of quality as an overall defensive unit, in my opinion, since last season. I don't think we have.
And Kilman's undervalued, and I don't mean financially, because obviously he went for a good chunk of money, but Kilman is arguably a bigger loss than Neto to us, because whilst we don't have a Neto, we have multiple attacking options.
Yes. And we look good going forward.
And Cunha and Larsson are clearly building a partnership. I think there's positives there, and we've got options up front, more like several options up front, different styles, but there's variety at the back. Kilman going is arguably the biggest loss for the team from this summer.
Well, if you're not going to replace him in terms of replace him with enough quality to play a back four, then yeah.
And there's a reason Lopetegui, obviously having been here, seeing him not just on the pitch but in training week in week out, kept pushing to get his man, and they upped the money because he clearly knew the potential and wanted him. Even though people have been saying he can't play in the back four, that's what he's doing. So it is a loss. It's a big loss, and I miss Kilman. I don't think he was a captain, but I think he's a great player.
Yeah, I wouldn't at all miss him if we had replaced him with a centre back who is the centre back that we're all saying we need. One with enough quality, strength, and ability to play in this back four system alongside Mosquera, because Mosquera, I think it's easy to say that he is not at all the issue. I think most Wolves fans probably see it that way. I think he's not covered himself in glory for, say, the Chelsea second goal, I think it was, but it seems inevitable that he's going to be our starting centre-back throughout the season.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of who's playing alongside him.
Yeah, we've got to remember, I know he's also made a few mistakes, but you got to remember he's raw. He's far less. I mean, this is his first Premiership season. Totti has already played in the Premiership, yet Mosquera is brand new and very raw. But his experience elsewhere in MLS, in was it Serie A? I'm mixing up my divisions, so probably not.
La Liga.
Apologies. But he's been out and got some experience elsewhere and come in. And yes, he's raw to the Premiership, but you can see we talk about potential with other youngsters coming in. There's clearly a player there to build around.
Yeah.
And he is going to make mistakes like they all do. They're all human. But I have faith that if the right person is alongside him, that could be strong. That's why I mentioned him in our preseason build-up stuff. But Gary O'Neill said it all summer. He wants basically an experienced centre-back. It's pretty much been one way or another, that's basically been a preach. All the fans have seen it since Kilman's gone. Everyone's been talking about it. The fans know it. Gary O'Neill knows it. I'm sure Matt Hobbs knows it. The big issue that everyone's discussing is whether the club is going to support the coach and Matt Hobbs financially and get the player that we so badly. We've been saying it for weeks, and here we are a few days before the deadline, and it's still not happened.
Yeah, well, you've summed it up. I think that's the bottom line of it, and we could talk all day about it, but that's what it comes down to. So with that being said, Chris, I think it's time we wrap up for today, and hopefully by the time our Wildcard Wednesday episode is out tomorrow, the club have announced the signing of an experienced Premier League centre-back who's capable of playing in the back four, and our season is transformed and we can all relax.
And we can hopefully look forward to a glorious victory over Burnley in the Cup.
Yes. But until then, guys, thank you for listening. We hope for a centre-half to come in, and we'll be with you tomorrow ahead of our fixture in the Cup against Burnley.
Take care.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.